Hello, hello. It's DNN Dave, and I'm here with Don Gingold again. Don, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Got a little rain down here in the south, and I guess y'all getting a little wet up there as well, huh?
Yes, the sun is shining, so you'll have some sun pretty soon.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, I think last time we got together, man, we started this cool little project that you and your wife have going on, and we built out some the beginning to a solution in Too Sexy, and we put some data in place, put the content
Right,
structure kind of there.
right.
And today we wanted to come together and take it to the next step and start building out a visualizer for that. Tell me what you've been doing between now and then.
Well, you had created the couple of tables. The one view, or the one table, I should say, is the books, and the other table is the glossary. I threw a couple of the books into the book table so that we had some data to work with, and I tossed a couple of terms into the glossary table so we have some terms to work with. And now I'm looking forward to seeing what this view is going to look like to get it onto the page.
That's cool. So let's take a real quick look here. I just switched over to the screen for our viewers here. And so in data here, we had glossary terms and we had set a book with a title, I believe. So I'm guessing you put in that year. Yep, there's your year published that you put in there, I
Yes.
believe.
So that's
And
important, is to know when the book was published. So
right,
that's
right.
in there now.
That looks good. Look at you being a too sexy superstar here.
I'm
And then it
getting
looks
it.
like you put the items in. So I guess you got some books here. Oh,
Right.
yeah. It looks great.
There's all our
Fantastic.
books.
With
Right.
the title and the year published. Fantastic. And then I guess you put in a few glossary terms as well
Just a
there.
couple to get us
Okay.
going. Things.
Good. Yeah, and we'll touch on this really briefly later, but it's good to kind of see how you can do this on the back end. But sometimes it's a better user experience to build out your view and then start adding content items from there because they're associated with views. So that looks good. So now we're ready to actually create a view, and I've worked some of this stuff out in advance here just to prep for this and make it a little bit shorter of a session here. So that'll be good to help us get through it here. But we need to go over to the views now, I guess, and add a new view. So let's go ahead and do that down at the bottom. And I
Yep.
think it's gonna, there's a lot to unpack here, but we're gonna try to keep this basic here. We won't dig into a lot of the details here. So forgive me if I jump over a few of these things and don't explain them too much in detail, but we're just going to deal with the basics today. So let's give it a name. We're going to call this glossary, glossary list, because this is going to be a list of our glossary items, right?
Makes sense.
And there are two types of templates that you can have in Too Sexy. One is a token-based template, which is just basic HTML with your content fields being referenced in brackets here. But as you can tell, there's not a whole lot you can do from a logic standpoint there. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to a more robust solution and use C# Razor. That gives us the ability to use Razor syntax, C# Razor syntax, to be able to do more complicated things. So we're going to choose that. And then we had when I was playing around, I created this file, so it's still showing in the list here, so it's still on the server. So we're going to use this. I've cleared it out and emptied it, so we're just going to use that. I'll briefly explain why it's underscore there, but this is kind of a partial that they're going to basically have a collection of a bunch of partials when it goes across the app. So it's just common for us to prefix it with an underscore there and
Sure.
use camel case. And CSHTML is the C# HTML. So it's kind of a blend of HTML and C# Razor syntax.
Cool.
So we'll choose that. If you were creating a new one from scratch, you would just hit the plus sign and
Okay.
create that from there. And then we need to associate a content type for this view. This is going to be the default data that is shown, or default content type that is used within the context of this view. So we're going to want to associate this to be the glossary terms content type,
That makes
right?
sense. Sure.
Okay. And then we will define a demo item. I think we had already created that in the back end, but really what this is this is used for if you add this view to or put it on a new page, it'll just preload that particular instance of that with a demo item so that then you can kind of see how it works and get to the actions that are defined within. So we'll set that one as our demo. Presentation options are just how to control some things that aren't related to the actual list. So background colors for the entire list or something like that, you would be able to do there. We won't go into details with that one, but we do need to go into the list settings here. And list, we just need to know that this is going to be enabled as a list, because you could have a view that is a single content item, or you could have a view that is a list of content items. In this case, it's going to be a list of glossary content items. So we're going to go ahead and enable the list functionality in here, and it'll expose some additional features for us there to use. And that's really all we need for this. So let's just go ahead and click Save.
Awesome.
Now we've got our view. I am seeing something here in T-Sexy 11 that's really fantastic done. Used to, you'd have to jump through some hoops to get to a point to be able to edit that particular template file that is there. And I see that they have added this code button here, and that is fantastic, because a lot of times when you're working in the back end, you want to just quickly access the code, and because you're dealing with the back end, right? So I am.
You can edit your template right there.
Exactly. So you can do that. You know, and I didn't really explain this, but you know, I kind of like to think of the view as kind of like this metadata that's associated with a template, and the template is the actual file, you know, that's there, the physical file that sits on the server, because it's kind of two pieces of information. So some people use those two synonymously, but I like to semantically kind of call this the view and the actual file being the template. So I'll try my best to refer to it that way. So let's go in and let's edit our template. And it's going to be blank here, but you'll notice right away that it has some Razor syntax that is associated with it. This is just something that's going to be imported in every list type view there, so that we could access some of the T-Sexy specific methods that they have put in place. And one of those is establishing the tag toolbar, or the actions that are used on the page. So let's just go ahead and
all the circles that T-Sexy has up on the screen, all those blue circles. Is
exactly. Yeah, let's take a quick look at that, because let's just put something here that's hard coded on the page. We'll just put ASDF here or something like that as an H1. And we'll go back over here and refresh the page. You'll also see that now we can actually, this is an app module, a T-Sexy app module that's on the page. Before, we could not choose anything but the actual app itself. We chose that, but there was no view associated, you know, to be able to select. So now that we've created that, it is now available. So we can now select that, save that, and now it should actually render. Oops, thought I hit the right one. All right, let me get rid of this. Now I can also mention that you don't really need to be in edit mode as far as DNN goes when you're dealing with T-Sexy, because you have all the capabilities to edit most of the stuff right within here. So now if I hover over this, you'll see that by default, it's going to show every action that's available in this type of view.
Yeah, there's all your tools.
So I can cycle through that, and you can see all of these. So one of the things that we do to try to help the editing experience is to limit those actions to only what the content editor really needs for this.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we're going to do here. So what we like to do is, this is the tag toolbar that we would like to use for the entire list. So anything that we would like to do out of the context of an individual content item, we typically limit that to about 2 actions. One is to add a new item to the list, and one is to be able to change the order of the content items within that list. It gives you a nice drag and drop experience, and that's we like to do that for the wrapper, if you will, of that. So you'll see that in the code. And then I've went ahead and pre-done some of this just to save time for our live stream here. So I'm going to copy that into my clipboard, come over here, and I'll just do my best to explain this code. I'm just going to replace all that was in there with this. Okay. And, you know, we were talking about limiting the actions. So this is exactly how we do it. We were able to put a comma, actions, colon, and then have a comma separated list of the specific names that are identified in TooSexy for those particular actions or associated to those actions.
Sure.
So in this case, we're using new to be the add new, and then the instance dash list to be the sorting kind of feature.
Makes sense.
So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Since this is a list view, we have to loop through all of the content items that are associated with this view. Remember, we set that default content item to be glossary terms.
Glossary terms, right.
So what we're going to use here in this outside for each, we're going to use a for each loop to loop through all those items. And we've done for each. CONT is just short for content. So for each piece of content or item, content item, we could literally call this item if we wanted to as well, because we're establishing that variable. Right. In the list, and this is new syntax in TooSexy 11, by the way, it used to be as dynamic, so now we use as list. And then in the parentheses, we put data. And then all we have to do is reference in brackets here default. And what that tells TooSexy is that use the default content item that we defined for this view right here. So that in this case is glossary terms. So it's going to loop through all the content items in glossary terms. Gotcha. And then we're going to put that into some HTML here and make it look nice and pretty. Okay. So I have used Bootstrap classes here to help us to lay this out. And this is using the default theme within DNN, the Exilian theme. So it is using Bootstrap 3, the latest version of Bootstrap 3. So we're going to use the classes that are defined in that. So in this case, I've got a row established in an outside div, and that goes from here to here. And then down below the row, we've got a horizontal row in there just to help us divide those items.
Oh, okay, yeah, just a nice ruler.
Yep, exactly. And then we've got two columns. So I've got a breakpoint set on medium devices and above. It's going to be 8 columns wide and 4 columns wide on the right. So you've got your, if we look back over at your mock-up here, it's kind of like this is going to be 8 columns wide for this piece of it. And then the image is going to sit over on the right.
Sure.
Now, we can tweak this and stuff a little bit later, but I figured that would give us a nice, layout to go with here at the beginning.
Right. That's a great start.
All right. Now, you'll notice that I've done something on this 8-column div to help us to be able to edit the content items. So we've got a tag toolbar up here for the entire list to add a new and change the order of the items in the list. But for each item, we're going to want to be able to edit. We're going to be able to want to replace items with other items that is in the back end. And then we want to be able to remove items from the list. So this gives us some nice in-context actions for every single item because we're looping through here. So that's going to show for every item.
Gotcha.
So then all we do is we reference the term, which is the field name that we defined in the glossary terms content type. And since we're using this variable of CONT, we just do @CONT.term. And that gives us that value back.
So that references the first term, the second term, the third term as it goes through the for loop.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I'm going to come back to this div here in just a minute and talk about that because that is our list of books. But the other simple ones here are the short description. And I was playing around with displaying the long description on the page too. And you'll notice that I kind of wanted to leave this in here to show it because this has some razor syntax to define this data that's being loaded up as raw HTML. So you'll use this pretty commonly if you're dealing with a field that is set as a rich text field. In TooSexy, we set up that field of long description to be a rich text editor. So we have to tell it using Razor that that's raw HTML that we need to render on the page. Now I had this commented out because long description is not really going to be displayed on this page. That'll be displayed on the detail page, right? So we can take that out of there.
If there's a long description, we don't want to put the long description. We want to read more button.
That's right. Yeah. So we're going to use a little bit more razor syntax here to do an if statement. So we want to check to see if the value of the long description field is empty or it's null, has nothing in it.
Got it.
So empty would be this blank, but it's kind of something.
Yeah.
And null is it's just empty. It's not, doesn't have anything at all there. There's nothing.
Sure.
So this has not. So we're saying if not is null or empty. So if it's not empty or null, then we want to display another div here, and I'm using Bootstrap 3 here to, Bootstrap 3 here to do a pull-right class on it. That just aligns it to the right
Exactly.
of the page. And then we're using an anchor tag, using Bootstrap 3 classes here to make that anchor turn into a button. So we're using BTN and then the default styling for that. And then we got read more as display as the text in that. Now, the special thing here is that we want that to be clickable, right? And go to the detail of that particular term. So I created a page under by word, which is where we're on at this point, on the view. I created a hidden page. It's just not displayed in the menu, but it's accessible to everybody, called by word detail. And we're passing a query string parameter in here of ID. And then, so there's a special, like that's not a field that you created that just gets created automatically to every content item in TooSexy. So that's nice. And then there's certain syntax that you use to reference that particular ID, and that's entity ID. So give me the ID for this content item in this entity. So that's going to pass that. So the idea is that we'll pass that query string parameter to the page of by word detail. And then we'll have a view set up on that page to read the query string parameter and display the details for that particular item.
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. And then lastly down here, we just have the, in the for column, we have the image set here. And again, I'm using Bootstrap 3 to make that a responsive image. I'm sorry, that shouldn't be fluid. That's Bootstrap 4. Should be image dash responsive. All right.
Oh, okay.
And I'll save that. And then the source is just that field, and that is set up as an image type already. So that's going to give us the path to the image. So that's where it's defining the source.
Very good. All right.
All right. So now for the interesting part up here, we need to each glossary term could have one book, but it could also have 3 or 4 books associated with it just as easily, right? So we need to loop through all the books that are associated with this glossary term, and then render a link there as well. So using the same syntax really as the outside wrapper, but this is just a list within a list. So we give me the list of books within the outside list for this item. So for each book in as list, and we just reference the field because the field is already set up. The field books is already set up as an entity in here. So that's some of the magic of TooSexy just working for you behind the scenes, and it takes care of this. So we can loop through all the books in there. And then we do the same thing as we kind of did down here, where we're going to pass this. I'll mention I made this a small button here. It's just another Bootstrap 3 class. But we're going to pass this to the by book page and pass a query string parameter into that as well. So it'll be book.entityID. And that should be the ID for the book content item that is associated with it. Does that make sense?
Got it.
And then I got fancy on the text here of the button and said, I wanted that to be the title of the book and then the year published in parentheses where you had added that field in there.
Right, I get that.
All right.
Yep.
So when we're done with this piece of it, we can save this. I could either do Control C or Command C. S and save it, Command S or Control S, or I can come down at the bottom right and click the checkbox to save it. So we'll save this, and if everything goes as well,
drum roll, please.
Yes, and we'll refresh this page, and this should look fantastic. Look at there.
Holy cow! There it is. There's the date. All right, so those are the books, the terms that I put in. And for each term, I put what book it was found in. In the case of Toke, there were a couple of books. So there's two buttons. There's our short description. As I looked down with bell handle, it had a long description. So there's the read more.
Mm-hmm.
And Browning also had a long description. So there's the read more. And there's a nice little rule after each one. Wow, this is fantastic. Pulled all the data, and that's exactly what I'm looking for.
So if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that the ID is passed in the query string parameter. So
Right.
that should be the ID of that particular glossary term in this case. And then
Awesome.
here, it's the ID of the actual book.
So
So
that
this
we have
should
to
work.
write some views for the detail and a view for what glossary terms are in a particular book. They'll
Absolutely.
be on those other two pages.
Yep. And you'll see here where our actions, that's for the entire
Oh, yeah.
thing, to add a new one or to change the order. So if I were to click this, there's our nice little interface for changing the order of the items in the list and adding a new. And then each content item, as you hover over it, has an edit, replace, and remove. So replace is just a way to change, let's say we wanted to change torque to bell handle. Then we can do that, and then you'll have bell handle on there twice.
Ah,
So kind of back to the conversation of adding these at the beginning. Now, all these just magically showed up. This was, I'm sorry, which one was this? This was Brownie? No, not Brownie. It was Toke. Okay.
it was
Yeah.
Coke. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you created all these in the back end and they just automatically showed up here. But in the real world, it did that because we had already done this prior to coming on the air. But you would have an empty view here, and what you would have had to have done is add
Yeah,
the demo item and then replace it with the actual book in the back end. So it's a
sure.
little bit more of a clunky experience there. Great to know how to
But
do it
now
in the
this
back
would
end.
be the way that my wife would now add a new item, a new glossary term by clicking the plus. She gets her nice form and she fills it out there. And then it starts,
Exactly.
appears. Fantastic.
Yep,
All right.
exactly. I mean, I think this is good. This is a great next point, and we can probably
Yes.
break here and think
Nice.
about what we want to do next, and we'll come back on for part 4.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, sir. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. I know this is a little quick for people, but don't be afraid of the razor stuff. It's a lot of that's just easy to find out there. It's not a too sexy specific thing, although some methods like tag toolbar and as list, that stuff is related to too sexy. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the stuff is pretty easy to find on general search. So don't be afraid of that.
Exactly. Procedure-oriented languages, if you know one, you know the basics of all of them. You just need to learn the exact details.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. This is DNN Dave, and this is Don Gingold. Have a great day.
Good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.